to another edition of the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Frank Bodani of the York Daily Record and Mike Gross of LNP alongside myself, Andrew Kalissa, but I am not important. We also got a great guest later on in the show. We are talking Penn State hockey once again, back-to-back weeks, and it is the voice of Pegula Rodney Martin is going to provide some great insight on the Nittany Lions as they get ready to head to Allentown and face off against Maine in the NCAA Ice Hockey Championships. Guys, Penn State national championships, record-setting national championships on the mat in Philadelphia over the weekend, but we're going to push that one to the back burner because it's in the past. We're moving forward. And with spring is life in the football program. We are going. I had a joke. I'm gonna pass on it to not get myself in trouble.
The internal editor, you need it.
It just flashed in here, so broke my train of thought. But it's spring football, and James Franklin holding a press conference earlier on this Tuesday. Guys, your impression, Frank, I want to start with you. Your impressions of where this Penn State football program is at and the spring development after just one James Franklin presser.
Well, I thought James handled things like a head coach that knows he's in a really good place right now. He seemed comfortable, loose. I'm not sure I quite understand his infatuation with the men's hair, but other than that, he behaved himself, I think. But, and I think a lot of people ended up quickly writing about the blue-white game because, you have this team that's coming back with all these players, and Beaver Stadium, where they play, is a construction zone. So, they're going ahead and holding the spring game where a lot of schools aren't doing it. And, how do you figure out how to do that from just how do we get people in there in a place where they're working on it 24/7? And then secondly, the whole idea of this is coming at the same time as the transfer portal is open and you're finishing up spring practice and you're trying to do a game in the construction zone. So, it'll be interesting, I think, to see how the blue-white game actually comes off. Are you convinced this is going to work, Mike?
No, I'm not convinced it's going to work. But of course not. Of course, I'm not convinced it's going to work. But you're right. I mean, there's all these moving parts, and the stadium construction deal is just another piece of it because it's going to open. If I have my facts correct, it's going to open in 2027, but they're going to play the 25 and 26 seasons and kind of halt the construction while they're doing that. We still don't know where the press box is going to be. I mean, we have a rough idea, but that'll be an interesting piece of it from our standpoint. I know nobody else cares about that. But anyway, from James from today, a couple of things. Number one, I think this middle linebacker thing is a real issue. And when Rich Scarcella, I asked him about that, and he named 9 different people who, supposedly are in the hunt to be the middle linebacker. Well, if there's 9, then there's nobody. If there's 9, I mean, that's ridiculous. And some of them were people who I didn't think of as a middle linebacker, like Tony Rojas, and he's apparently going to be very limited this spring. So if he has to learn, supposedly there's a lot of learning specific stuff about that. And then the other thing, and this is from Mike Porman's question about the revenue sharing stuff. When are we going to be able to find out? Why can't we find out any specifics about where this money's going and to whom? I mean, it's a state institution. It ought to be public record. Certainly pro sports, we know, I know more than I want to about how much money those guys are making. So when are we going to get to a point where that becomes something other than this big state secret. Those are the two things that I was struck.
Well,
You mentioned
the thing is we don't even know what most of Penn State's assistant coaches make. They don't have to give figures for everybody, but this is all brand new, right? So Franklin actually is talking like we're not sure how this is going to all come down at the moment. And maybe he knows a lot more, obviously, than he's letting on. But yet, when you're talking the new frontier in a way, until you're there, I kind of understand maybe you don't know what's exactly how it's going to play out.
I'm not really being critical. I'm not really being critical of James. I'm just saying, like, when is it going to become a little bit of an industry standard that this becomes
right?
Non-secretive information. I don't know.
Well, kind of going off of what Frank mentioned earlier with all the moving parts, the stadium, the blue-white game, portal, all that kind of stuff. We know at least on the revenue sharing, we're waiting on a court case. But the whole calendar, there's no waiting on that. The NCAA dug their hole or grave, I guess, as an institution with how they just had it was over-regulation and then no regulation that they provided and then made everything the free-for-all. And not one person, not one of the conference commissioners got together, called a meeting, got everybody in a room, and allowed these grown adults they should have been locked in a room, the door should have been chained, and they should have come up with an actual solution that works with all these transfer portal issues. And nobody at the NCAA was going to step up and do it. But the coaches have been complaining, and I get that some writers say, do as I say, not as I do, as we've seen basketball coaches jump 1 year. But at the same time, you cannot run a football team with this many moving parts, 25 guys in every single year, and be recruiting your team as you're going into the bowl season, playoffs, as you're recruiting already on next year's recruit, and then recruiting your team again during spring practice. It can't be happening. There has to be like a set window, and then you're locked in for that amount of point. And no adult in the room was ready to step up and fix that issue, which would have been better for the kids in terms of them being taken advantage of.
Yeah, but you're right. Here's the thing. Here's a good example of this. People say, well, there's no guardrails. There's no regulation. Well, the NCAA made a regulation that the transfer portal is going to be open while the playoffs are going on. And now a spring period while spring practice is going on. And the other thing is 105. I'm sorry, Frank, but
no, go ahead.
105 on a roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
All can be on scholarship. There's going to have to be some very specific roster decision. I mean, are kids going to get cut? Are kids going to get? Is he going to give? Is Penn State going to give 105 scholarships? I'm sure they are. But I mean, at some point, that's going to be self-evident. I mean, we have a kid from Lancaster County who's a walk-on. He's either going to be on the football team or he's not. And some of this is going to come to light. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a step at a time. I mean, I don't. The thing is that we're still not figured out NIL completely, right? We don't know what any of these guys really make definitively. And the transfer portal, there should be just one transfer portal period. I mean, having two, it doesn't make any sense. And neither of them are at good times.
Yeah.
Bad enough you have two of them, but they're at like the worst times possible, it almost seems like. So did they do this on purpose? I mean,
yeah, right. What's the what thinking could it possibly have inspired this?
Cowardness and lack of thinking. That's my take on it. And I'm also a believer that with revenue sharing and everything, the players wanted all this. I mean, there's been meetings with unionization attempts. You get what you ask for. And at some point, if you're wanting all this money, I think it should be public. That's my take. And I don't want to say you treat the kids different because I realize that there's 18-year-old, but hey, you're still coming to play a game. If you're going to demand this in a recruiting and want this from fans, then that comes with some expectations. And if fans' expectations are going to be sky high based on what you're getting, then the fans should know that. That's my take on it.
That's kind of what I'm saying. I agree 1,000%. Yeah.
And I know there's different circumstances for all these type of kids. And if they're going to get it, get it. Again, this is all because the NCAA didn't let a kid with a YouTube page make money on advertisement and revenue. That's where this whole thing.
There you go.
James Franklin was asked about the progression of Drew Allar. And I thought it was a great question. And I thought James had an interesting answer. So we will take a listen to Coach James Franklin talking about his quarterback and his growth and where he needs to go.
He needs to take another step, when it comes to his mobility. He needs to take another step when it comes to his leadership. He needs to take another step in terms of his, his completion percentage. Needs to take another step in terms of his touchdown interception ratio. It's really all of it. There are some things that me and Drew have had some conversations with Danny O'Brien that those conversations will stay between us. But I would say, just being transparent with you, I will say I don't think it's one necessarily specific thing.
So that's James talking about what Danny O'Brien and Drew Allar have talked about. To me, guys, I read that touchdown to interception ratio. I read that as let's be more aggressive and not afraid of interceptions and push the ball down the field. Again, push it in a smart manner is how I'm interpreting this. And I'm also saying that some of these conversations may have been a little bit hard just based on how James worded that soundbite. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Your thoughts?
Well, he asked the question.
Yes, there we go. So I would start off with, to me, it's, I agree with the pushing the ball down the field as almost a demeanor change with him in the way that he makes decisions. Like have we really seen Drew Allar in a tough end of game moment be a great quarterback? And I think all his talent is there. And he led a really successful season last year. But, the lasting moment for people is how he performed at the end against Notre Dame. And honestly, the best quarterbacks, the great ones, no matter the talent level or not, they own that moment when you get the ball back, when you have a chance to win the game. And it still just didn't look like he's at the point in his development where he owns the moment. So maybe some of these factors of improvement can go into that. To me, that's the missing piece yet for Drew Allar.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it any better than that. I think that at the end of the Notre Dame game was a classic moment of the type that quarterbacks are judged by. And he threw a bad interception, and that was certainly a winnable game. And if you win that game, you're playing for all the marbles. And that's the next step. I do think he's made progress. I do think it was interesting. You're right, Andrew. It was interesting to hear James say that, we've had some conversations with me and Danny O'Brien, and I'll keep that to myself, which was sort of like James is willing to go a little bit public with, hey, I get it. This guy still needs some tweaking.
I got to tell you, in the 15 years I've been around covering the team, and I know you guys have been there longer than I have, this is the most poignant session of questions that I think a blue-white game has ever had. Frank, I thought your question was, I'm not picking favorites just because you're here. I didn't know that was your question because I didn't get to listen to the press conference. I was reading the transcript that Penn State sent out later after it was over. I thought that was the question of the press conference, much of it in the way that James answered it. It was just intriguing to me. Guys, tell me I'm wrong, but with what you guys just said, it's almost like Drew Allar's Penn State career, for all the success and everything that is done, he doesn't have that Christian Hackenberg Allen Robinson type catch against Michigan, but it's that Peach Bowl pass that got thrown straight up into the air. And then there's the parent reacting. What the hell was that? And then there's the interception against Notre Dame. Is that fair that those are the two of the more memorable moments in his career with all the good stuff that he's done?
Oh, it is fair because I think, as Frank just said, he hasn't had the great moment. He hasn't had, I mean, so everything you think about this guy is somewhat tempered because he has not had the great moment. He's had the less than great moment in these type of situations by which quarterbacks are judged. He hasn't had the great moment. He's got a ways to go. And if he doesn't have a better year than he did last year, not that last year wasn't very good, I don't think Penn State's going to get where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have the difference maker there, and in whatever way they can do it. Like Michael Robinson was a difference maker in certain ways that Drew Allar could never be. But Drew Allar everybody knows what he brings, that he can make any throw physically probably in the book. There's not one he can't make. He's become actually a really tough, good runner. He's a big guy, so he's hard to bring down. So he has all these qualities. It's just, that's such a hard position because he's won so many games because he's got such a sturdy built team around him. But those moments, I guess it's fair because if you're going to be a quarterback at that level, that's what you're going to be judged upon. And the question is, how many of those moments is he really going to have this coming season with how good they could be, right? Probably, maybe not a whole lot, but so you have to take advantage of the ones he gets, or we're going to still be thinking about him this way.
Yeah,
no matter if they win 10 games or 12 games.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a whole lot of those moments to this point. But the ones that there have been, he has not thrived.
You're absolutely right.
Hasn't necessarily been awful, but he hasn't thrived.
You're absolutely right because he had the early one. Going to Ohio State 2 years ago was one of those, and he ended up not doing well and crying in the end. Okay, so then there's the Peach Bowl, and then there's Notre Dame, and I'm not sure. I mean, they beat Minnesota at the end, but and he did well enough managing it, but that wasn't, to me, that's not one of those moments, right?
Wasn't it? No.
To his credit, all the other games are taken care of, and he hasn't needed one of those moments against a lesser opponent. And as you guys are talking about this, and we bring up that Penn State has won a lot of games with Drew Allar as a quarterback, it's almost like he's waiting for or needs that A-Rod type moment when he was with the Yankees. During the regular season, 3-run bombs in the fourth inning when it's already 2-0 New York, is a little bit different, racking up numbers than actually coming through with the big hit, in October, November that Yankee fans were accustomed to with Derek Jeter.
Well, I'll tell you what, the USC game I thought kind of was close to being a moment for him, right? Because the way he led them back, you didn't think that he wasn't worrying about throwing interceptions in that game. It seemed like he was loose on the road, had a couple of picks, no big deal. And he completes the 2 fourth down passes to Julian Fleming. And he actually did a good bit of that too. I mean, there was one of those where he had to maneuver around in the pocket.
Those were great throws. So you're right, Frank. That's close as he's come. That's he can get a moment. I agree. Yeah.
But it didn't go forward really from there in a sense, right? I mean, that's the thing.
And I just overlooked that moment. I overlooked it, and I think a lot of people do because USC ended up not being a good football team last year. And that gets lost. But Frank, that's a great call, calling us out that we forgot that moment because you complete 2 fourth down passes. You have to tip your hat to that.
I tell you what, and that's a really good point to bring up is that when opponent doesn't finish the way you think they should, you forget it. But it's like, we got to remember that the moment is what it is. And at the moment, USC was a good team playing their best, right? And you could, my great example, I love this, is in 1994, right? They don't lose a game. They go to Michigan, and at the time, Michigan's a top 5 team. Well, Michigan didn't end up good at all, that really the way they were supposed to be that year. But in the moment, that day, they were a top 5 team, and they pushed Penn State, and Penn State had to give everything they got to win. And you got to give them credit for doing that in the moment. So I guess maybe we should give Drew some credit for that, right?
You know, when I think of that game, I think of Tyler Warren more than anything else. Because he was just insane in that game. And then in the Minnesota game, I think of that fake punt. So maybe I'm being a little unfair to Drew because there is this element. This has been true throughout the Franklin era. There's this element that, well, if Penn State wins the game, then it wasn't a big game, because I'm convinced that James can win a big game. You know, there's some of that swimming in the water all the time.
Right.
Absolutely. And everybody has the tape. We did say, I said USC was a big game. So credit where credit is due. You know who has some big games coming up? At least one big game, Penn State hockey. And that is where we are going to next. I said earlier in the show, we were going to talk some Penn State hockey. Yes, back-to-back weeks. We are talking Nittany Lions on the ice. And no better voice to follow up Brian Tripp last week than the in-house arena announcer in Hockey Valley than Rodney Martin. You see his Twitter handle on the screen if you are watching on YouTube. Rodney, welcome to the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast.
And thank you very much for thanks you very much for having me on, and I'll see if I can contribute anything worthwhile after Tripp. He knows a lot more than I do, so we'll see.
Oh no, you are going to contribute plenty. You're the shake and bake. You're the guy that gets everybody in the arena pumping. Now you're not gonna be the voice in Allentown, even though Penn State is the host site for this regional for the NCAA Ice Hockey Championships. But your initial thoughts. Penn State, in this tournament, they get in. Have you ever seen a team just get so hot at the right time to punch their ticket?
It is absolutely unreal. You know, just in our the 12 years now, being in varsity, January was always a grind. If you go back and look at the schedule, we were always, I think, right around 500 or maybe in a little sub 500 going into January. But man, I tell you what. Ever since that game, ever since that series that we split we were played at Wrigley and then at Notre Dame, this team has just found another gear. And yeah, I've never seen anything like this before. These guys they're playing as a team. They're playing with cohesion. Everybody has their role, and people are buying into those roles. And that's, I guess, that's a credit to their just mental toughness for what they went through in the first half to be able to turn it around and come back and play in this way. Like I said, it's unreal. I've never seen it before.
It seems like, Rodney, Penn State hockey has a history of being able to play with the best teams in the country and often upset them. I mean, that's my sense from afar. Now it seems like they've sustained outstanding play game after game after game for quite a while. What's the explanation? Is it offensive cohesiveness? Is it defense? Is it goaltending? What's going on?
I think you're right. Well, throughout history, I mean, like I said, there was a lot of people when we came in at a varsity program, they thought, oh, you guys are never going to win. You're going to be and whatever in the Big Ten for the first couple years. You're going to have to take your lumps. But, I mean, we turned around and we beat Michigan the first time they came to Pegula Ice Arena, and that is a blue blood, right? So I think we kind of took people by surprise, and I think we took ourselves by surprise. That first group of guys that came in here, they really wanted to prove something because a lot of those guys maybe hadn't gotten a look. Or kind of got passed over at some Division I programs, and they came here and Guy took a chance on them, and that team was, I mean, you talk about with Tommy Olchuk and that gang, Matthew Scoff, some, and like I said, they had something to prove. And I think, like I said, we took people by surprise. And then everybody said, okay, we can't take Penn State lightly anymore. And then, so it kind of leveled off, and then, we started building up again, made it to the tournament, the NCAA tournament for the first time. And I think, okay, people were finally realizing that, okay, yeah, maybe Penn State's here. But as far as your question, as far as what it is offense, is it defense? I think it's like I said, I mentioned earlier, I think it's just everybody knowing their role. You have your top two lines are going to go out there. They're going to create havoc. They're going to get in the zone. They're going to grind hard. And then you have like the bottom six, the forwards, they're just doing a great job out there being physical, eating pucks. And then our defensive pairs have been really gelling. We had that injury with Dowd this year. He was out, now he's coming back and contributing. He contributed big in that last weekend. So, yeah, I mean, I just think as far as this year goes, like I said, we had the big injury to Sergeyev. That I think that was a huge blow. But even that led to a great story with Seifarth coming in. I mean, a club goalie, being somebody who started with the club team, seeing him come in and get a chance and actually get a win, and those guys just absolutely playing their heart out in front of him. I think that was another bonding moment for this team. I can't. People talk about like chemistry in the locker room. I think this team's got it. I think so. Maybe that it's not something so much on the ice. I think it's everybody coming into this family role and just everybody gelling off the ice. That these guys want to go out there and play their hearts out for everyone.
Rodney, can I ask you, with the way the team is playing right now, you've seen a lot of Penn State ice hockey. How good is this team playing right now compared to the best that maybe you've seen in the past? Are they up to that level? And maybe how do you think they're going to fare this weekend?
I think they're getting there. I mean, if you want to talk about some of the best, one of the best teams, unfortunately never had a chance to prove that was, in 2020 when the season got cut off by COVID. I mean, we had just come off, we were the regular season champions, and we were the favorite to win the Big Ten postseason. I think that team really had a chance to be the first one to get to the Frozen Four. Took a little bit of a hit coming off COVID. I think everybody did. It was kind of hard to recover. I don't know that this team is quite at that level, but I think they can do it. I really do think if we can go in there and knock off Maine, the Hockey East champion, I think that's going to be a huge boost. And I think the sky's the limit from then on. But as far as like, if you had to play those two teams against each other, yeah, I think that 2020 team was maybe a little more skilled. Of course, we never had a player like Fink but we had, I think the skill, the talent was a little more spread out over that team. But yeah, I think this team's got, if you have, for lack of a better term, that it factor. Like they can do it. They get past this first game. I think the sky's the limit.
Maine fans, the Bangor newspaper has an article out there. You kind of alluded to it. A hockey writer that I work with on the side, he's alluded to this as well. The Bear fans, they're upset with this, that Penn State gets a home game. You had a very good take on social media. So I'd like for you to kind of explain that here. But what is your take on Maine fans being a number one seed and them being upset that they have to come down to Allentown, Pennsylvania to play?
Thing is, if we did make the tournament, we still have to host that. So it just happened to be that we go there. So my take was, it's like, I get it. I mean, it's, you think it's a home game and all that, and this is, somebody else brought up the point. It's like I initially said, Allentown's almost 3 hours away from State College. So is that really still a home game? But somebody else reminded me, it's like, that's a pretty big alumni base up in that area, but let's not talk about that. But then the second point I brought out there is like, if you're upset at Penn State, get on your athletic department and host a regional. I mean, there's plenty of rinks up there in that area, in Maine, and I mean, all of the New England area. You could co-host with somebody, and then you would get a quote unquote home game. And you and I were talking earlier. I mean, nobody's making I don't know if anybody from BU is being upset that they have to go to Toledo. I mean, granted, they're not a one seed, But I mean, they're going to Toledo as a 2 seed to play Ohio State. Ohio State's not even hosting that regional. That regional is being hosted by Bowling Green, and obviously they didn't make the tournament, or they would have been there. But I mean, they're playing against Ohio State in Ohio, and they have to travel all the way down from Boston. I mean, I get it. I mean, maybe it's message board fodder or whatever, but like I said, it's not like right next door to State College. And like I said, if you don't like it, host a regional. I mean, like I said, if we didn't make the tournament, we'd still be up there hosting it. So
yeah, it's a risk reward. That's what athletic departments, athletic directors do. They're putting in with the hopes that things come together and you get that draw, and it helps fill the program. This is going to help build Penn State's program, just like in the past when they've been in this situation.
Absolutely. And for Allen, I mean, I think we got a great partnership with PPL, and they do a good job of putting on a show. Like, I don't know if you've been there already. I mean, I know you haven't, but I mean, they closed down that. I mean, they really put on a good show. Like, they closed down that street. They have kind of like a fan fest there, and things are going on pretty much all the time. And I've been in that building, two of the times that we got in there and hosted there, and unfortunately I saw 2 losses, but I mean that the atmosphere is dead, and the place was it was packed and it was bumping, and I think that's not only good for Penn State and for promoting Penn State, but it's good for promoting NCAA hockey. You see this, it's like, holy cow, man, this thing's lit. Let's go.
To me, this is a huge weekend because the spotlight's on this team, on this program, right? I mean, for Penn State fans, that it's more than football, right? And of course, last week was wrestling, but this week is ice hockey. So big moment. I mean, probably, Rodney, wouldn't you think? I mean, this is a huge opportunity, not just to win an important game, but to kind of like promote this program, right? I mean,
100%. I mean, the timing is just right? You obviously basketball wound down, didn't have the season that they wanted to have, and you said we just had a big weekend with wrestling. So and the fact that this, like you said, we talked about earlier, how this team has just been absolutely on fire. I mean, like you turn back the clock at the beginning of New Year's Eve, we're sitting at 32 in the pairwise. And now we're I've obviously, we're a 4 seed, but we finished 13th in the pairwise. So, I mean, to make that much of a jump in that time. And I think there's a buzz. You're right. There is an absolute buzz around this team right now, and not to add any more pressure to what these guys are probably already, as tight, but even as tight as that locker room is, and as cohesive as it is, they got to be getting the sense that, holy cow, we're on the verge of doing something good, or doing something, maybe a turning point for this program. And like I said, I hate to say something like that, because I hate to be the one, like, now if they lose, it's like, okay, I said something and I put all this pressure on them. It's all my fault. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, Frank. I mean, this is a chance to really kind of take a turn. And if you look not only with this team this year, and you see you look at, like, we placed 2 guys on the Big Ten all freshman team. We had, we should have been 3. I don't know how JJ Weebush did not get on that team. But you also turn around and you look at the guys we have coming in next year. Some of the guys from Canada, the major juniors coming down. This is like I said, this could be a turning point, and I just hope the team is up to the moment.
Oh, in terms of pressure, I wonder if semi-hosting, but also being an underdog, right? I mean, they're going to be an underdog against Maine. That's probably a pretty good mix, I think, in terms of the pressure or the psychology of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why I never really played organized sports much beyond my being a kid. Because I mean, that to me that is a lot of pressure, and it takes a different breed. It takes a whole different mentality going into that. Going like, okay, here we are. We're going to have this place is going to be packed. It's going to be bumping. Let's just not go out, and lay an egg. Let's go up there,
sure,
and play our game. You kind of harken back to one of my favorite movies is Hoosiers, right? Where they go in there and they say, "Hey, go, measure this line here. Oh, it's 15 feet. Oh, measure it. It's still 10 feet. Oh. So everything's the same." There may be, and this team's played in front of some incredibly hot and just popping crowds. Whether it's Pegula, I mean, we set our attendance record 3 times this year. I mean, so that place is just always jamming. And then even, I mean, I would say with the exception of Ohio State, I think every away arena you're playing at in the Big Ten is pressure packed. It's jamming. It's packed. Lots of people. It's loud. So I mean, maybe they're used to it by now. But you said, and hopefully they can tune out this possible turning point, and like I said, and use the fact that people can still see them for all that they've done in the second half. Still see them as an underdog. I mean, maybe just turn that fire up inside them a little bit more.
What's it like walking into Pegula on the night of a big game? Because I still go back to the first year. I was up in State College. We created a TV show called The Blue Line Inside Penn State Hockey. It was great show from an independent TV station at the time. Myself, Mike Tressa. But I remember the glass got knocked out and there was a major delay. It was the first time the glass was ever knocked out and the students were going nuts. And Penn State, they didn't play well. And Guy Gadowski comes in. He's like, I just want to start with this. That was an incredible environment with what the students were doing with, I think it was a 27 or so minute delay. That's also the same year that Michigan came in and you referenced, and Red Berenson was like, this was a great atmosphere we played in, where Penn State beat Michigan 4-0 after getting beat the night before. And that was at the time the biggest win in program history. So for you, when you're coming to a Penn State versus Minnesota game in a whiteout in Pegula, what are the emotions like for you? Are you tingling just as if it was you calling the action with Joe Putnam inside Beaver Stadium for a whiteout game against Ohio State?
To me, I and don't get me wrong, I don't want to get myself in trouble here. I love football. I love the fact that I get to work at football. That is a dream come true. But there is going to be nothing that compares, unless I get some job with an NHL team, which is probably not likely. I don't think that it's ever going to compare to coming into Pegula. Just the way that place, I don't know how to describe it. There's like a sizzle that you come in there. You could just sense that something's going to happen, good or bad, and the place is just going to go nuts. And I mean, even now, I just get goosebumps thinking about it. But yeah, especially if you have a whiteout and it's like a big game, the students are going to be there. The place is going to be packed. Yeah. So in those games, you try not to get too high and too low, because to me, as just not that my job's that important, but I mean, I want to make sure that I don't detract from that. If I ever detract from because I'm goofing on the mic or whatever, then I'm in the wrong. But yeah, you just try to keep an even keel. But I sometimes think we should have a microphone on me when I don't have my microphone on, because I am probably screaming just as much as the folks in the stands, maybe even more so than some of the older folks that sit kind of towards the end where I'm at. Not as much as the student section. Those guys, and Guy, you mentioned how even during that delay, I remember that we played music, they sang along, and Guy, I think he remembers him saying something like, we had more jump after that than we did before. So that kind of that whole delay, and that was all because of the war zone. He talks about how that's such a such a huge recruiting tool to say, look at these kids, they come here, they are loud, and they're just so supportive. So, but you're talking about, and that's just part of the Pegula experience. I mean, when we first opened that building, I think it was probably one of the top 2 in the nation. Now, other rinks have caught up, but for us to only be in the program be an NCAA program for a little over 10 years, to have that kind of atmosphere, to have that kind of, I hate to say tradition, but I mean, we do have some good traditions there in Pegula. It's just awesome to be a part of.
You are excitable. I always used to keep an eye on you. You, PJ Mullen over there, cranking with the timber counts early on in the Pegula days. I remember them well. Frank, do you have anything? If not, I got 2 more to toss at Rodney.
I'll toss them. Give it to him, Andrew. Come on.
You talked about turning points in the program. Aiden Fink being nominated for the Hobie Baker Award. What does that mean just to put Penn State on that pedestal? That in itself is a pedestal. So for Penn State to have a player there, what does that mean?
That's huge too. He's got lots of ink this year. He's deserved every bit of it. He is the real deal. And how he went to the 7th round, the Preds I think he's got to steal with, they got to steal with him. And I think he could be our first, we've had guys play in the NHL before. But I think he could be the one that kind of sticks. But for us to have that, like I said, a lot, for the longest time, we started with, like I said, the players that had a kind of a chip on their shoulder, and then we started getting the talent. And I remember the first couple times the teams put forward, I think these guys should be Hobie Baker, and everybody's like, oh, we're getting guys in the Hobie. No, it's just like, okay, these are who we're nominating. Yeah. But this guy, if Aiden Fink's not in the top 3, at least, I don't know that he's going to win it, but I think he's going to definitely be one of the top 3. He's the top 10 right now. That's big in itself. But as far as like the program goes, it kind of gives it credibility, right? You've seen there's teams that do it with a whole bunch of you go back to like Herb Brooks. I'm not looking for I'm looking for the right guys, not the best guys, the right guys. For the longest time, and teams can win that way. They can win without the superstar, but to have that superstar, it just draws more talent in. And I think it was kind of like a chicken and an egg thing. It's like, well, Penn State's not turning out NHLers, but you have to have an NHLer come here first to do it. So what's going to happen first? And again, as far as turning point, I think that could be. He said, oh, hey, you got Aiden Fink. He's a Hobie Baker finalist. He was a 7th round pick, and he makes it in the NHL. He went to Penn State, but maybe I should take a closer look at Penn State. So, yeah, absolutely big for the program.
And the last one I got for you, because you are such a great voice and you're not going to be on the mic in Allentown, I can't let you go without, let's see, second period, no pressure, not an early start, not a third period goal. I need a second period Penn State goal call as if you were on the mic. You could pick the player. Maybe it's an Aiden Fink who you want to call out. How are you going about this, and what's it going to sound like? I know now you're in your house, so inside voice kind of here.
Oh no, there's no go big or go home, Andrew. I mean, no. All right, so here we go. Okay, so the long drawn out Nittany Lion goal. Okay, ready? Here we go. Nittany Lion goal, scorer number 18, Aiden Fink. Melodious. And number 4, Simon Mack. Time of the goal, 12-18. That's an even strength goal by Fink. Assisted by Genevieve and Mack. Time of the goal, 12-18. We are!
Ladies and gentlemen, Rodney Martin, the voice of Pegula and Beaver Stadium here on the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. Rodney, thanks so much for being here. We're going to be on the Nittany Lions, pushing them to get that first round win against Maine, and then who knows, UConn, Quinnipiac off to the frozen floor as well. Thank you, boss. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. All right, thanks for sticking around here on the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. Just one thing to talk about left. We've talked hockey. We've talked spring ball. I guess we might as well talk another national championship wrestling squad. Frank, you were in Philadelphia. You saw all the drama. You saw the flag out for the heavyweight. I mean, what a match that was. Gable Stevenson going down. The president in the house, which we talked about it being a niche sport, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. I think the president of the United States being at a sporting event that's deemed a niche sport is kind of big for said sport. We're not going to get into the politics. That, we're just leaving it at that. But what was the environment like in South Philly?
This is only my second one, and last year in Kansas City they filled the place up, and it was pretty live. And this was good too, but it had to build a little bit, I think. And I have to make an admission. This is unbelievable. I sit through like literally in that arena for like 15 hours a day, right? And so Josh Barr is the second to last match of the entire tournament. He loses. We know that when he's done, we have to get, if we want to talk to Kale, we got to do it right then because that's when Kale's going to be available. So all of us go in there into a separate room. I don't see any of the Gable Stevenson match. Can you believe this? I don't see any of it. I don't even know who wins until we come out of it. Is that a travesty? I'm watching it on YouTube like everybody else.
I'd be pissed.
Yeah, sometimes that's how stuff works out for us. And
isn't it?
Do. Yeah.
I mean, anyway, so obviously that's tremendous when I could actually go back and review it, right? But it was, here's the thing, is like, so Penn State on opening day of this tournament wrestled 20 matches. They won all 20 matches. Okay, so that's incredible. It's only done like twice, I think, in history. But the other thing is that in those 20 matches, they gave up one takedown. Only one time in 20 matches was one of their guys gave up a takedown, and it was in the first match of the day. They went 19 matches in a row, didn't even give up a takedown. And it's so, like, they didn't have everything in the world didn't work out exactly like it could have. Like, they only had 3 guys in the finals, but they were so overall dominant, and they were so good at even coming back from when they had a couple slip-ups that it's just a foregone conclusion that there's nobody going to beat them. And I'm not sure anybody's going to beat them for the next, I don't know how many years. And I think the key, obviously, is Cael Sanderson, the way he runs it. And that's the best mystery in the sporting world, is that the greatest dynasty going in sports is run by this guy who just is fine being humble and putting his hat down over his head and not saying a whole lot. And we can surmise, but how does he do it? Right? I mean, it was one of the, they broke their own team points record. They did everything to dominate, and I guess a lot of it was as expected, and they're just rolling on,
Mike, based on the conversation we had with Tripp last week and some of your questions just asking about put wrestling in perspective. So we've talked wrestling for the better part of a month and a half on here on what the squad was doing, the expectations. They first time ever 10 for 10 All-Americans and 6th place in above. 1st through 8th being All-Americans on the wrestling podium. Penn State they did it. Jeff Byer said it most likely was going to happen, was hoping it would happen. It did. They've only put 3 guys in the finals. And I say only because of how many guys they had seated number 1 or number 2, which, Frank, I believe the number was 7.
Yeah, and they took 7 guys to the semifinals.
And 7 guys to the semifinals, yep.
Yeah, and you're thinking you're going to get more than 3 in there, but...
So my question to Mike is, knowing those facts and with you being, not fully engrossed with the wrestling community as you're a basketball guy, when you see this Penn State, 2 national championships after all of us talking, I see people from other schools on the Wrestling Room on Facebook, which has a giant following. There's other schools talking trash on Penn State, and here they are, this record-setting team. So you being a basketball guy and an outsider, like, did Penn State live up to the hype? I mean, you got other people saying they laid an egg.
You have brilliantly anticipated my thoughts, because this is exactly what I was going to say, even without the question. It is, in my ignorance, sort of paying attention to this from afar, I'm seeing stuff on social media like, well, Nebraska's in the lead or close to in the lead in the team. Well, a Penn State wrestler lost. Like, what's going on? By the insanely high standards of where they are, did they overachieve in the NCAAs? Frank, I mean, what do you think?
Did Penn State
overachieve or meet? Let's just say not overachieve. That's a poor word. Did they meet expectations, giving the insane expectations?
Okay, well, that's a good question, and I think it goes back to wrestling being a very unique sport. Because what other sport is quite? How many other sports are so much individual and yet so much team at the same time, being judged by it? So I think overall, as a team, they met expectations. People thought this team could get 10 All-Americans. They did. They thought they could break the NCAA points record that they set last year. They did. They obviously were going to run away with winning their 12th national title in 14 years, which no matter how good Nebraska did, they still did because they beat them by like 60 or 70 points. So that way, I think they definitely met them. I think the thing is you also judge wrestling completely individually, each match, each person. And in that way, I think the look was if they did all the things I mentioned and did it with 6 guys in the finals and 3 or 4 won, then they do it. It's just simply that individually they had some guys lose in the semifinals that were kind of so-called upsets, right? But then the crazy thing is that the next day on Saturday in the morning, they went 11-1 in the consolation round. They had 5 guys finish third. I don't know if that's ever even been done. So
honestly, that was the thing that kind of impressed me. Again, in my ignorance, I thought, well, that's really impressive that guys, got upset or whatever, whether it was an upset or not, and fought their way back to get all the way through the consolations. Yeah.
And here's the thing, wrestling is the sport that can drive you. I'm an outsider too, right? So it can drive me nuts when 2 wrestlers are wrestling. They go to overtime. It's tied. And they decide who the winner is. And I'm like, well, you didn't really decide who the winner is because somebody didn't have more points than the other guy. It's like in the Olympic trials, it was like that, where all of a sudden they decide the winner based on who scored last, not the score. I'm like, what other sport does this?
So the Bo Bartlett match, I felt for him having to ride out to 27 seconds and then needed to escape for him. And I've always hated how that decision has come down. I just do. I would like to see that, but hey, that's the sport. That's the rules. Just kind of going back to it is, this is we're talking about, and I don't want people to jump over. Oh, we said Penn State late in it. I'm not saying that because they had a great tournament. They're a record-setting tournament. I'm using it as a figure of speech, but that's the standard. And that's other schools are looking at any sign of weakness from Penn State. Oh, they only got 2 national champions. Well, okay, great. But look at the total body of work. And it goes back to what Brian Tripp said. Cale feels for more. He feels more upset for the guys who did win one than he does excitement for the guys who have won one.
We're just talking about. What we're really talking about is how high the standards are.
Yeah, that's what
there's no other team in any significant American sport that's in the place they're in right now.
One thing I wanted to address with you guys, watching it on TV, I didn't like how, and I watched it on delay, I didn't like how Starachi started the finals. This is a 5-time champ, and and he was hot about it. He called the NCAA about it. He's like, you're trying to go to sport, you're throwing me out there first. Granted, the way everything ended, I think Gable Stevenson was the good call, but why not put a build-up and put Carter right before him? That would have been a tremendous back-to-back bout.
Well, I heard about it, and I heard him talk about it, but other than that, I don't know. Frank, what do you...
Well, I think sometimes maybe you overthink things, but I think what the thought is you have 2 great matches. What do we do with 2 great ones? And I think they decided that if people know that these guys are wrestling to end, they may not tune in right away. And I think they looked at it like, get it going with one of the great ones so that people are in there. I guess people are going to be watching and they got to know if Carter wins and they're already tuned in and they're going to stay tuned in. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. I really thought they would possibly end with Carter. And maybe, but I think as it went, they made the right call with who they ended with, because that was obviously one of the greatest college matches ever. So I don't,
17th century.
But Carter was upset, but you got to love Carter because there's no other guy around probably in that arena that speaks his mind quite as freely as he does. So all of a sudden he's going off after he just become the first 5-time winner ever. He's going off on when he wrestled. And there's another story for us to write.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's like, come on.
Content creator. He's a content creator for himself and for us.
Right.
Hey, guys, tell me about this guy from Japan that's coming to world champion. And
he's a content creator.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay. So we get to the arena. I get to the arena like by 10 a.m. on Thursday, the first day. It doesn't start till noon. All of a sudden, my boss texts me, "Did you see what happened?" I'm like, "Oh, so we have been talking about this kid." And I even said, I hope he just kind of decides to like not do anything until after the NCAA championships. Well, on Thursday morning, it finds out that he's enrolled in the university. So the kid has already been working out there at the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club. He's enrolled in the university. So we pretty much know he's going to be on the team. But he's a world champion.
Right.
And he just kind of blasted onto the world scene last year. He's 21 years old. And he's a lightweight, so he's like basically 130. It'd be like the equivalent of probably 133, maybe a couple pounds heavier.
Yeah, okay.
So he's just apparently. I mean, I don't really know the wrestling deal in Japan, in Asia. Okay,
come on, Frank, pick it up.
I know, but he apparently just has this combination of unbelievable quickness, and he's very strong. And he wanted to wrestle and learn at Penn State, so he came here in the winter, and he's been living in State College, training with the club, and he had a match with Spencer Lee, and people who know wrestling at all in PA know Spencer because he's from Western PA. He just won the silver medal in the Olympics. And Ono, there was like a challenge match at the end of February, and Ono beat him 3-2. And so he's obviously the real deal, and he wants to wrestle at Penn State, and he committed to him, and he doesn't speak very much English, so this should be really interesting going forward.
You got to check him out on Instagram or X, wherever. Him walking through, I think it's the family clothesline, and he's like, "We cut pants here." It's like it's hilarious, and he's cutting his jogging pants. It's awesome. Yeah.
Well, with all this stuff, I mean, we talk about Penn State wrestling trying to get into the big time and getting big time exposure. I feel like Penn State's doing all it can do with some of the personalities and everything that surrounds their program. In addition to the fact that they're kicking unprecedented amounts of butt,
This is the wrestling version of Hideo Nomo taking baseball.
Nice.
You right?
I thought you were going to say Otani.
No, you got to go back. Oh, no, come on, man. I have more respect for history than that.
All right.
Yeah, it does give a different flavor, right? So we're not sure how this is going to play out, like how dominant he's going to be, what kind of personality he's really going to be, but it definitely adds some flair to things, because sometimes I think when Penn State just kind of numbingly rolls through every dual meet win during the winter, it gets a little boring, right? I mean, it could. This is a little spark. This is
Somebody has to ask if he's related to Yoko Ono. I'm not sure if the names are pronounced the same, but they're spelled the same. So I'm intrigued. I need to know, and then I need to compare singing.
Mike, do you know what his dad does for a living? Oh, no.
No, I don't.
I think he runs a soy sauce company, like a big one. Huge. Wow. Nice. So there we go.
Yeah.
We're going to learn more and more about this.
My closing thought, and let you guys get a closing thought, is it was a great tournament for Nebraska, which I think is great for the sport. It was a great tournament for Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys are coming. So for those people, and going off of what Jeff Byer said weeks ago, other schools have to step up and challenge Penn State. David Taylor as the Cowboys, they're coming because he's taken that attacking style that made Penn State what it is. He took it down there in very impressive showing from Oklahoma State head coach David Taylor in his first NCAA championships as a coach.
Now, my closing thought is I want to know what this no kid is making.
Yeah. Well, and Mike, I got to tell you, because, about trying, like you talk about the publicity of the sport. We always talk about. So I got to just mention this because this kind of blows my mind. So we get out there Wednesday at 1:00 at Wells Fargo, and they have a press conference, like a pre-press conference. And sitting at the podium are Gable Steveson, Olympic gold medal winner, one of the best heavyweights of all time. And basically next to him is Carter Starachi, going to be the first 5-time winner ever, who's really won about 100 matches in a row. Do you have two of the best all time in their sport, and there might be 25 people there, media in the room, and no one wanted to ask a question. And I'm like, if you took the greatest two football players and sit them at the table, I mean, we couldn't get in?
Yeah. And
what a different take on this, right? I just sat there almost dumbfounded, thinking, this doesn't make sense in a way.
And there had to have been some journalists there who were very knowledgeable about wrestling, right?
Way more knowledgeable than I was. I thought, my God,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, how can they not have a question? Yeah, crazy.
I don't know, but anyway, it was just a little behind the scenes kind of.
Yeah, I hear you.
They're a subtle bunch. I go back to it. I loved covering the PIAA high school wrestling individual state championships. Actually watched Spencer Lee lose his final match as a high schooler with a torn ACL. Went through the tournament with a torn ACL.
Boom.
Yep. And the journalists are just a quiet bunch. Not like us here on the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because of those big press conferences where we got to shout 20 yards our questions.
Yeah, that's right. Same concept. Concept.
Guys, another great show. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you guys at home for listening. We are going to address a email that came in. Apparently somebody is not happy with me pushing a basketball arena and has some thoughts on the basketball program. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're not getting to that next. We'll get to it next week. So for Mike, Frank, I'm Andrew Calista. Yeah, can't wait for that one as well. Probably going to get some hate mail as I didn't get to it. So we'll talk to you next week. You guys have a good one. Thanks for listening. BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast at gmail.com. See you later.